The high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth, and Paul said, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. And somebody said, would you revile God's high priest? And Paul replied, I didn't know that he was the high priest. And you shouldn't speak evil of a ruler of your people. So Paul was not ignorant of the politics and the priesthood in Jerusalem. And I find it hard to believe that Paul would not know who the high priest was.
Yep.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
it was complicated because if I remember right, I think Ananias was the son of the prior high priest. And it's not necessarily father to son, but it often is. I mean, we see in Torah that it went from Aaron to Eleazar to Phinehas. So it is frequently father to son. But these priests, from what I've heard, they had essentially bought the priesthood. I don't know if they were Levites even. I'm not really sure. They might have been legitimate priests, but they were not legitimate high priests. And Ananias at this moment was not officially even in the office of high priest. I think I read earlier this week that the office was vacant. His father had died, and they had not officially appointed anybody to replace him, but Ananias was presumed to be the next high priest. And so he was acting in that role, but hadn't been anointed yet. And so when Paul says, I didn't know he was the high priest, maybe he didn't know, or maybe he's saying, this guy's not the high priest. I don't know what you guys are talking about. And you know it. But, then he changed his strategy and he said, okay, I'm not going to attack this guy because, I don't want to set a bad example. Everybody believes he's the high priest, so let's just go along with this. And instead, he gets the council to fight amongst themselves about a different topic. I think that Paul is just playing expert politics here. He knows all these people and they all know him. He knows who the high priest is. And he's just thrown a wrench into their schemes. At least that's how it seems to me. Paul is a very smart guy. And he's very well connected politically in Jerusalem. He's connected to the priesthood, but he's not just connected to the priesthood. He's connected to the Roman authorities. Because otherwise, I don't think he would have been able to get away with traveling outside of Judea and arresting people and bringing them back to Jerusalem. And that's what he was doing when he was headed to Damascus, when he had that encounter with Yeshua on the road. He was on his way to arrest people and he was going to bring them back to Jerusalem in chains. Well, you can't just jump around to different Roman provinces and kidnapping people without the Romans having something to say about it. So it seems like Paul had a lot of authority and political connections. And some of that comes out in this story where the zealots are conniving with the priests to get Paul transferred in a way where they can ambush him, kill the Roman soldiers, and kidnap Paul and kill him. But his nephew finds out about it. Well, this means his nephew is connected in some way to the zealots. Then the nephew comes to tell Paul about it, but Paul is essentially in prison. He's a prisoner. So who let him in to talk to Paul? I think his nephew is known to the Roman guards who let him through, saying, yeah, this kid's okay. And we don't know how old he is. He's probably a young man, but we don't really know. And then when Paul talks to him, he says to the Roman guards, this guy's got something to say to the tribune. And then they take him to the tribune, which also, again, you're talking about Romans here. Why would they be believing this Jewish guy and taking the word of this Jewish kid? And when he gets to the tribune just believes him. Said, oh yeah, whatever this kid is saying, that's true. And he not only believes him, but then he gets together a group of 200 mounted soldiers to escort Paul up to Caesarea. This is very expensive. He is spending a lot of money, sending a lot of manpower just on the say-so of this kid, which tells me that all of Paul's family is very well connected. The tribune knows who they are. They know Paul's nephew. They know Paul's sister. And since Paul wasn't local, he had lived for a long time in Jerusalem studying under Gamaliel. But originally he was from Cilicia up in what's southern Turkey now. But his sister and her family lived in Jerusalem. And this makes me think that Paul's family was probably connected to the priesthood and the leaders of the Pharisees in Jerusalem, which is how he got in to study with Gamaliel. And his sister probably married into one of these families. And so now through his sister, he has close connections to the priesthood and all of the powerful people around Jerusalem. I don't know that for sure. It's just, I don't know how else Paul could have done the things that he did. And I don't have another way to explain why does the Roman tribune care what this Jewish kid has to say. Doesn't seem to ask for proof, just takes him at his word. There's a lot going on here behind the scenes that is not in the text.